My name is Candace Hunter, and my signature name is Clee, Chlee. My art practice is I am a truth teller, a truth slayer, and a beautician. Beautician in that what I create, I want to be beautiful, even if the truths that I'm telling are quite horrific. Because quite often I talk about truths that are a part of the fabric of America. And for being a black person in America, then those truths are often problematic and quite often not discussed or discussed fully or discussed wholly.
Why do you think sapphire and crystals is important?
Oh, anytime black women gather, it's important because we don't have that many opportunities to do so. And that artist can get together with all of our stories and all of the things that impact us and come together and share those with a larger public. This is important work. As a child, I grew up in a household where my mother belonged to several social clubs. She belonged to the Chatterettes, she belonged to the Jonquils, and she belonged to a sorority. Sapphire and Crystals is important because it's a gathering of black women's voices, black women's ideas, black women's talents. And this is always a really important thing to do, and it doesn't happen that often. As a child, I grew up in a household that I had a mother who belonged to social organizations. She belonged to the Chatterettes, so I chat a lot. She belonged to the Jonquils, and she belonged to a sorority. I'm not going to say which one because I don't want any fights going on up in here with the sorority piece. However, I grew up around groups of really incredible black women who all had opinions, and they were all intelligent, and they were all movers and shakers in Chicago. So to be a part of Sapphire and Crystals, it was the same kind of feeling of sisterhood that I think my mother felt in the organizations that she was a part of. So not only do we get to show our work, but we get to engage with one another, and our conversations grow. What we feel and think, sometimes we change one another. Sometimes we always grow with one another. And so it's an incredible thing. I don't know of it happening anywhere else in this country, let alone Chicago. And so it's important. It's important for that sisterhood. On the altar this time here at Southside Community Arts Center, there's the things that I offered were the hard work. So I got the little candle things and I got a lot of the fabric. So I didn't put the individual touches on the altar, but there's a person on the altar who is so very dear to me. There are people on the altar who are very dear to me, one in particular, Renee Townsend, who was one of the lights of Chicago as an artist. I first met her here at the Southside Community Arts Center. She was doing a workshop with children up on the third floor. And I only met her briefly because she was busy doing what Renee did. And so I didn't really meet her until several years later. We did a workshop up in Detroit at Wayne State on teaching artists how to teach art. And I was her guinea pig on the mask making. She was an incredible sculptor. And she did my face, and as it starts, the plaster starts to dry, you can feel it tighten and tighten and tighten. And she started whispering in my ear, "Okay, don't laugh, don't talk, it'll crack." And of course, as soon as you tell somebody not to laugh, then you're going, and so I wanted to kill her, but I didn't. And we went out for drinks that night at the hotel, and something magical happened in that friendship. It was cemented that night over really good tequila. Um, and over that summer, I think we talked every single day, sometimes a couple hours a day. Her birthday was the week after mine, and so she was at my home for my birthday. The next weekend for her birthday, she was going up to Michigan, and we lost her that weekend. So I had Renee for one summer. So I never really got to be a part of Sapphire and Crystals while she was part of the group. I came into the organization the following year, and it's probably because I felt Renee kind of nudging me, saying, "You need to do this." So I'm always thankful that she's there, and I still get to live with her.
Was there an exhibit, a Sapphire Crystals exhibit, that may stand out for you?
Oh, it was the postcard show. We did a show. Marva Jolly came up with the idea of doing a postcard show, and I remember the meeting when she said, "I just saw this postcard show. I think it was in St. Louis, and we need to do that. And they need to be postcard size." Well, not everybody adhered to what a real postcard is, but I took it absolutely to heart, and so I scoured old bookshops, and because all of them have drawers of ephemera. And so I pulled out very antique postcards, and I took them ones that still had stamps for a penny. And so I gathered several postcards. I took them home, I shot them, I scanned them. I then took out all personal writing. And I created 4 postcards that were from Langston Hughes to 4 really important people in his life. And so one was to his grandmother. When he was a boy, he left his grandmother's home and went to live with his father for a time. The next one was to his agent at the time when his books really weren't taking off. The third one was to one of his best friends, Arna Bontown, who was at Tuskegee University. And I can't remember who the fourth one was to, but there were 4 of them. And all of them really told stories about who he was at that time in his life, but it also told stories about who the owner of the postcard was. So the one with that had been to his grandmother, I had roses on it because she would have held this as a very precious thing from her little boy. The one that Arna Bontown had, it had a coffee stain on it. It had some cigarette markings on it because from everything I've ever heard about him being in the library at Tuskegee, Fisk, I'm sorry, Fisk, let me get the university correct, Fisk, is that he was notorious for smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee all day long up there in the stacks, but it's what he did. So it was his postcard was kind of messy. The one to his agent was pristine because that agent understood what ephemera was and would have put it away, so it would never touched again. And so all of them had little feelings about who got it, what the story was, what was happening in America at the time the different postcards were written. So that was like being a detective, that was being an artist, that was being a historian. So it was a really fun personal assignment that I gave myself to do. So social justice has become watchwords that everybody is saying, and so it's like the word intersectionality and Afrofuturism. So I was doing all those things before those words became words, before they became, catchphrases. So I don't think of my work as social justice. I think of my work as truth-telling. And part of what the story that I'm concerned most about is water safety, water security, and women and water rights. So I have a traveling show called Dust in Their Veins that educates people on what that really looks like, what that really feels like, and what they can possibly do to help the situation. It is a global concern. Unfortunately, most people who are affected by lack of clean water look like me and look like you. They are normally people of melanin. But we do know that water is going to be an issue to everyone in 20 more years in this world. But right now, it mostly happens in sub-Saharan Africa, the Central America, and in India. That's where the most dire cases are. But when I would go around and I would talk to people about water, I would always warn. I said, it's coming for you too. And what happened? Flint happened. Flint happened. And then people went, "Oh, Candace." I said, "I told you." So we've got to be very vigilant. We have to be very careful, and we've got to watch what is going on politically and corporate wise, because most water scarcity is about corporate and governmental greed. It's not from the heavens, it's not from God. It is because people's pockets want to be heavy with golden coins where the least of us suffer. And so that's some of the work that I do and will continue to do. I think that Sapphire and Crystals really needs to sit down like in a retreat for a good week and really, really put down the history on paper with real dates, real people for each show, and have a compendium of that information as opposed to, oh, I've got this bit and I've got this bit. Everything needs to really be recorded properly and in one place so that catalogs can be done, books can be done, exhibits, traveling exhibits can be done. But until that piece is done, that part, the next steps can't happen. So I'm hoping that somehow we figure out somebody who would pay for all of us to come for a week's retreat. We all get to eat together, we get to create together, and we get to really put down all of the real information, the hard information. That's kind of hard when everybody's moving in different ways and has different concerns. So I think we all need to be really under the same roof for a good solid week. And so do fun things and then do the hard things. Because, you know, it's the hard things that'll trip you out. Oh, I would hope that Sapphire and Crystals can sit somewhere together, possibly a retreat for a full week. We're all gathered together so that we can start to put down pen and paper, digital ink, all of those real dates, all of those real first thoughts, all of the people who are part of each show, so that we have this real body of information that's all in one central place. And that is what is going to allow us to catalog, to have a book, to have traveling exhibits. But right now, because everybody has lives, and you know, we're taking care of people, we're doing class work, we're doing our own shows, that it's kind of hard sometimes for everybody to put all the pieces together. So it would be so great if some, I don't know, Ragdale, somebody invited as many of the girls up as possible so we could really sit down, break bread together, talk about what it's done for us, talk about where we want it to go, and really compile all of that information so that we can move forward as this wonderful group, the group that we are. Some of the women in Sapphire and Crystals I had known before I ever did a show and admired them greatly. Some of the women I got to know after I started doing Sapphire and Crystals, I admire greatly. So whenever you get to be in the same space with people you admire, it only lifts you and makes you better. What a force, what a presence, what an intellect. One of the last conversations that Marva and I had, we were somewhere, some other show, and I had walked around and I wasn't thrilled. She had walked around, she was feeling the same thing. And she came over to where I was and she says, Candace, we as a people have to come up with a new visual language. We have been stuck in the same visual language for too long, and we've got to move forward. So I'm also hoping that's one of the things that Sapphire and Crystals continues to do, is to move forward. But I think she's very, very right on that. is that sometimes we, and I'm not speaking of Sapphire and Crystals, I'm speaking of the large communal we get very stuck in places and we don't continue to grow and we don't continue to have conversations with others that allows us the space in which to grow. And she and I both, when she said that, I got it. And she was just like, oh, and I see you got it. And I think she was absolutely right. We've got to keep moving forward. We've got to change that conversation. And what's so wonderful, I wish that Marva were still here with us right now, because things are changing at breakneck speed just in the last 2 years. The way the world has just flipped on itself, God, I wish Marva were here to see some of that movement, because I think she'd be quite proud. So sometimes I have had the joy of working with very small children. When I was in New York, I worked for the Jamaica Art Center and the New York Board, and so I had real little ones. I've worked with Gallery 37 here in Chicago, so I've worked with teens. I just finished working with a bridge program for young people who weren't given what they needed to have been given to succeed. And so I worry about those children who look like me. I worry about those children who look like my daughter. And what I need to always say to young people when I meet them, and I do, I look them directly in their eye and I go, oh my God, you are so intelligent. You are so wonderful. Who told you that today? Am I the first? Let me tell you again. And every young person I meet, whether they're very little or they're older, I tell them that because they're not being told that enough. So if any of you are little and you're doubting that you're wonderful, I'm here to tell you that you are. And anything you want to do, you can do. It's there for you. Don't let anybody else stop you.